Thank you. Taoiseach, there have been very significant events at Bus Eireann, which I think has caused deep concern amongst the workforce and indeed the travelling public as well. And I would make the point, Taoiseach, that I think the issues are fundamentally of a policy nature and that there are important policy principles at stake here. And I think it is extremely important that the government makes it clear that it supports the principle of a state-supported public service transport company. I want to make it clear that we do, and we think flowing from that should be a determined effort to ensure that the existing issues and challenges are resolved. There have been significant cuts to the public subvention to Bus Eireann in recent years, and that should be acknowledged, from about €49 million in 2009 to €36 million this year, which does represent an increase this year over last year. But nonetheless, that indicates the significant change in terms of public subvention that has occurred. And in terms of the free travel operation of that scheme, Bus Eireann receives about €4.86 per passenger on a route, compared to the fare of €11.78. So it's very clear there is a yawning gap between that as well. And there are two avenues that are available to any government of the day in terms of ensuring the retention and viability of any public service transport company. The route licensing system needs to be reviewed, and Deputy Robert Troy has articulated that on an ongoing basis. And I would make the point, Taoiseach, that decent wages are important. In a society and in developed economies where there is growing inequality between those on very high wages and those on low wages, the state has a role to play to make sure that there is some decent degree of incomes policy in certain sectors of our economy, because certain sectors there has been very significant downward pressures because of globalisation, and we have seen the political dislocation and disruption that has occurred because of that. And that is a significant issue in the context of the Bus Eireann dispute as well, and of that there is no doubt. And that is something that you have to weigh up. The Labour Court has declined to get involved, Taoiseach, and I have been making the point consistently to you that this is not just a narrow management union issue, it is a broader issue in terms of public policy and transport policy. And I am going to put it to you, Taoiseach, that the Minister for Transport needs to convene talks between the National Transport Authority, which has a critical role in licensing and so on, the Department of Transport, Bus Eireann and the various trade unions involved to iron out the policy framework and the key issues that can form the background to a successful resolution of the outstanding issues.
Thank you, Deputy Martin. Well, obviously, government. This is a matter of policy. It's also a matter of commercial reality, and it's a matter that essentially is under discussion between management and trades unions. As you're asking a question here, the Joint Oireachtas Committee is currently hearing from the Acting Chief Executive of Bus Eireann in regard to the company's current difficulties. A government policy in this area, Deputy Martin, is that the public and the travelling public should have access to the best quality of transport services, whether that is frequency or choice of routes, and that should apply for customers and for commuters. There have been quite a number of positive changes, Micheál, in the last couple of years, which have resulted in more services, better frequencies and more competitive fares. And the travelling public have voted here with their feet, as the numbers using commercial bus services show, about 23 million in 2015, and we should first and foremost welcome more people using public transport. I point out to you that the Minister for Public Expenditure granted an increase in the subvention of 17% this year, for year-on-year now up to 35 million. But it is a commercial fact, as I pointed out before, that the passenger growth is not being felt in the expressway arm of Bus Eireann, and this does compete with other operators. I gave Deputy Troy the number of licences issued over the past number of years, which was a point that was raised where there was some understanding about the numbers that were actually issued over the last number of years. Now, I do hope that the trade unions in management can continue to engage in a realistic and a constructive fashion about what is a serious matter. There are those who try to ascribe this to be a policy failing, but Minister Ross and I have stated that this is a commercial problem now, and it deserves a commercial response. And that means that a resolution has to be found between the company and the trade unions. We need to be very clear about this, because at the heart of this public policy issue are the travelling public, and we need to be clear about what should be the overarching objective, and that is to get more people using public transport, and I pointed out the improvements that have been made here. I might say to you, in respect of your comment, Deputy Martin, about the National Transport Authority, well, in terms of rural Ireland, the National Transport Authority stands ready to intervene if required to do so, to ensure that public transport connectivity, if commercial services are reconfigured following the discussions that take place between management and trades unions. And the NTA have issued invitations to political parties and groups in order to explain their role and their opportunity and their responsibility in this area. So nobody, least of all government or the Minister, misunderstands or underestimates the difficulties that Bus Eireann faces, but these difficulties will not be resolved through media comment. It will be through dialogue, discussion and negotiation.
Thank you very much, Deputy Martin. 1 minute.
Note from your reply, you say access to the best quality of services. You don't necessarily say that you support the idea and principle of a publicly owned transport company such as Bus Eireann. Do you believe in the principle of having a public transport company? And that's an important policy principle that you might clarify. And secondly, Taoiseach, in terms of the Minister's inputs, I mean, the real doubt and suspicion here, Taoiseach, there's been a clean-out of the former management. 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were being told it was just Expressway was the real issue here. And subsequently, it has now become the entire company. And language like insolvency, there's been a ratcheting up. In my view, culminating in the premature move to the Labour Court yesterday, which didn't work and it backfired by the management side. And it seems to me that there's something afoot. And people are saying our fingerprints are on nothing, as in the Minister and so on, sure, we're not involved. Yet everybody actually thinks the fingerprints are well and truly on a policy that's been pursued, to a degree, by stealth.
Right,
and I think that a bit more transparency, Taoiseach, from all would be welcome, but I think the convening of all-round talks on the policy issues and routes would go a long way to beginning a pathway to resolving this issue.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Well, let me assure you that there is nothing underfoot going on here. The central issue, is the expressway service and the losses that are accumulating there every year, despite the fact that the subvention has gone up to 35 million this year, an increase of 17%. I understand, Deputy Martin, that there was some preliminary engagement with the Labour Court yesterday, and that the focus of that engagement was about procedural requirements relating to future discussions. So the Minister is very anxious that management and unions would sit down and continue to negotiate in respect of the central issue there, which is the commercial loss-making end of the expressway service. And obviously, I pointed out to you that NTA have a different role and responsibility here, and the Minister has pointed out that in the event of expressway services being reconfigured, where that impacts on rural Ireland, that the National Transport Authority are available to provide connectivity to those rural areas. And this will also be impacted in part by the publication and the implementation now of the programme to deal with the potential of rural Ireland. So it's a serious matter, but it's also one where a central policy is that more people, more customers, more consumers and travelling people should use the public bus services. There have been improvements made in the last number of years, new frequencies, new routes, more competitive, but there's a central issue there that is a commercial issue, and I hope that management and unions can continue to sit down and negotiate on that, and if necessary through the mechanisms of the state.